fascinating. I think it was interesting on a bunch of different levels. But I think I'm going to start with the one that I think I just sort of maybe felt as much as anything else, and that's this idea of who you are serving. Who is this for? And having come from a traditional media background, many of you did come from traditional media background, we talk about the audience, we talk about the reader, and it tends to be very abstract. In all of your cases, every one of your cases, the readers in many cases have a name. Juan Luis, you talked about friends. You don't put a paywall up in front of friends. Is that actually how you think about your audience? And maybe you can start.
Yeah, sure. I mean, at the very beginning, we knew that in a moment when in Spain it is very difficult to get funds for building a digital site, we had to relate with people from the media perspective as we do as journalists in social networks, for instance. When you are in social networks, you build a community around your content or your identity or whatever, and you have a personal interaction with that kind of people. So how do you get that feeling, that vibe, and put it into something which is a platform, not social network, but an online newspaper? And our relationship with them is personal. Obviously, it's not 20,000 people that I know their names, obviously not, but we try to do events with them, meeting with them in different cities, and we try to personalize our relationship with them. And we are trying to understand their editorial interests, nor their commercial profiling. We really want to know what kind of stories people are reading and why. And if they become our member, what did they read just before becoming a member of Socio?
I'm curious, actually, just for the panel. Membership is a model I believe deeply in, actually, and I think the recent numbers coming out of The Guardian show that it's even a model that could work from when you're transforming from an ad scale-driven model, traditional media. I'm curious what you all think, whether on a small level we know it can work, but what about on a bigger level? Are there things that we can learn? Go ahead, Jenny.
I've been studying this all over, from Texas Tribune and Voice of San Diego to El Diario, where I was about a month and a half ago, and all over Latin America. It's still an outlier. It's still not in the top 5, but it is absolutely the most important that's growing. It's the one that's most sustainable. It's the one that most supports independent journalism. And I think you really capture one of the reasons it works for some of these folks. Other people have alluded over the last couple of days to this sort of journalism idea that the journalist is this all-knowing being and the audience is this sort of ignorant mass they have to help. I've really seen another thing across all of these digital natives, that they treat their audience with respect and they get it back. I've been quoted probably more saying this than anything else on Twitter this year in Spanish. It's a lie that readers won't pay for content. If you do it well and you reach out to them, they will be your best supporters.
Juan Luis, you are by far the most tweetable presenter. I think you said, we have to get away from this notion that our job is so important that the money will just come. I actually, maybe you can kind of address this, having come from traditional media, now working in a startup world. Do you think, from that perspective, do you think that is a primary issue with traditional media? Is that a problem for us? Do we need to get away?
I've said it for God knows how long now. I think there was the period where the profit margins got so big. I was at the Washington Post for a long time. And the profit margins got so big, I think we stopped listening to the audience because we really didn't have to listen to them. Yeah. We had huge profits. We kept hiring more people. And if a bunch of people canceled a subscription, they were replaced by 5 times as many who got a subscription. So we just stopped listening to them, in my opinion. And so that really put a lot of legacy brands behind the 8 ball when it came to trying to reconnect to those audiences because they felt like there was a distance. So my attitude going into starting Billy Penn was nobody owes us anything. Nobody owes us anything. Everything we get from the consumer we have to earn by treating them the way that they want to be treated. And I think that's a lot harder when you had this long period where you weren't paying as much attention to them as you should have.
I loved, Tony, I loved this idea of what was it? TGC. Yes, TGC. Yeah. I like this idea of trainees. Think about where that could go. Do you think that that's actually a model? That's the first time I'd actually heard about that. Do you think this is a model for journalism? Do you think we could become organizations that essentially train our successors, that train our friends to be full participants in what we're doing?
Yeah, I need to explain a little bit background because I think also in America now, media or journalism is not just entitled by the professionals, because ordinary people, through a certain of training, they can tell stories, and then the readers will feel this is more close to them. Yeah. So I think we are not monopoly. The professionals are not monopoly of this industry. So we need to open up, and then also to let them in and give them certain of training. And actually, the university and all these professionals, they can step in and have all these crowds. And then this is really enterprise. Yeah.
And Tom, just very quickly, crowdfunding. I mean, I know you're humorously raised $75,000 every time you do it.
Accidentally every time.
Every time. But is this something that we should actually be looking at as a model for mainstream, for traditional news organizations?
I didn't think we'd make it past a year. I was constantly told you can't keep going back to the well and doing this, but I think year after year, we keep raising the same amount, right? It seems to work, and you see NPR, Wikipedia, and Democracy Now! Other platforms and outlets doing the same thing. And yes, if we just look at the analytics, cats and Kardashians do well, I suppose, when we do those kinds of stories, but we point to, our really good quality big features, and those are things that trigger people to donate. And I have some faith if we keep doing that and produce good stuff that people have changed and are getting used to the idea, particularly in this era of fake news and all of the threats and issues around the industry, that they've been reminded that it's good to pay for journalism and it's expensive, and press freedom is not free. So I have some faith we'll be okay.
Excellent. So let's go to, we have a questioner.
Hello, thank you for sharing. I apologize for having to share two personal messages first. Firstly, I'm sorry for stealing your name.
Don't worry. I'm more than delighted. I'm honored.
We can talk more about that, but also to my long-term friend, Tony, I wish to say that we still have a tiny bit of professional journalism present in China, and we try to, preserve it and try to extend it. Well, basically my question for you as a startup naturally is for copycats. So if you are proven, successful business model, these copycats will not only just, steal your business model, and sometimes they just rewrite your story or just simply copy your story. And, we're living in a generation when we talk to the Chinese audience and also the international audience, they are more and more using aggregators, aggregation, apps and all these ways of getting information, and they don't really care about which news brand or startup brand they get the news from. So how do you want to deal with it? Is there anything unique that you can offer the users that they cannot steal from? Thank you.
That's the point why it is not all about the content, but about identity. And it is not about the product being called the news, the piece of news, but about a fluent relationship between you, the audience, the content, and your attributes as a project.
Please just tweet that. I mean, I know that's multiple tweets, but that's good stuff. That's gold. That is gold.
But, I mean, we actually do a lot of members, socios, because of our transparency rules for our budget and that stuff. Or we do a lot of socios when we are threatened by politicians or private interests. So you have to maintain high quality content to prove that you are being serious about journalism. And then the trigger that provokes that people are donating money to you are not always related to the content that is very good. It is related to an addition of things, and then something triggered it. Some trigger can be a campaign that we do, or some trigger can be our external pressure or something like that. So if some of my content is copy-pasted anywhere, if they quote us, bravo, because that is us spreading the news. That's what our members pay us for.
Again, they can steal the content, but they can't steal the relationship.
Yeah,
If
exactly.
you have a relationship.
Tweet that.
Absolutely. Tweet that for sure. But also as journalists, get better at SEO. It's really easy to steal your content when you don't SEO it yourself. And develop relationships with those media. When you see them picking up your stories, reach out and say, hey, we could give you this stuff more effectively if you actually treated us with respect.
Jim, do people, when they come to Billy Penn events, do they identify themselves as Billy Penn readers? I mean, they do.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And, yeah.
Next question.
Hi, my question's for Jim. What has your expansion strategy looked like? What does it look like going forward? And have post-election revelations impacted that?
No, I don't think the elections have much of an impact. We were lucky to be in swing state, a couple of swing states for the election, so it was lovely for traffic. But I think the expansion plan is to just try to find cities that we look for 4 things in cities. Obviously, a preponderance of people under the age of 40, a pretty dense city because we don't have huge newsrooms. We're like between 5 and 9 people. So we want to find cities where a lot of people are sharing the same experience and the same real estate so that we can impact as many of them as possible with a small staff, looking for revenue and looking, obviously, revenue opportunities and competitive opening. So we're going to continue to try to expand. I think we're going to try to do it smartly so that we don't create 10 of them before we've really figured out the model. I think we're learning new things in each of the 3 cities we're in. And we consciously have different size staffs and slightly different strategies around events in each of the 3 markets. And we'll just try to keep learning and applying them forward.
Jeff?
I knew it. Told you.
The last question is,
Just so you don't. I'm not going to ask a question.
Even worse.
Instead,
worse.
I'm going to propose that for the 18th great ISOJ, Rosenthal, Amy, Jake, all the crew here deserve a standing ovation because it's been